Good morning. Today's Wednesday. Today I woke up. I said I'm going to be happy. I don't care what's going on around me. I'm going to embrace the notion of happiness today. PJ! I almost changed PJ diaper, but I didn't. I met him when he was 2. I think the nigga was on.
It started as any other school day. At 8:32 a.m., Jennifer Bellony picked up her phone and called her mother. There was no panic in her voice, just a calm, haunting message. He's here. Less than 2 minutes later, her street in North Lauderdale, Florida, was no longer quiet. By the time police arrived, a mother and her 15-year-old daughter were lying on the pavement, lives stolen in broad daylight. Sirens echoed. Neighbors watched in disbelief. And a man who once lived in that very home was already gone. Jennifer had just turned 35. She was a mother of 3, building a better life for her children after years of struggle. That morning, like countless others, she was helping her daughter Anastasia get ready for school. Her youngest child was still inside. Her son had already left. What happened next didn't come from a stranger. It came from someone who once called them family. He didn't yell. He didn't force his way in. He waited. And when he saw them, he acted. Anastasia tried to run. Jennifer tried to protect her. But in seconds, both were shot. One of them died at the scene. The other didn't make it through emergency surgery. To the public, this was another horrific news headline. But to those who knew Jennifer, it was the tragic ending of a story that had been building for years, one filled with control, fear, manipulation, and ignored pleas for help. Why would someone go to such lengths just because the people he once loved tried to move on without him?
Welcome to Dark Trace Crime Stories,
where we bring you the real stories behind the headlines. If you're new here, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and turn on the bell so you never miss a case. And for those of you who've been here before, thank you for supporting stories that matter. In today's video, we uncover the heartbreaking final chapter in the lives of Jennifer and Anastasia Bologna, and the overlooked warnings that led to one of the most devastating family tragedies in recent memory.
We're going to move on to this story now. The search is on for a shooter after a mother and daughter are killed near their home. 7's Brandon Beyer is live in North Lauderdale where it happened. Brandon.
And Vanessa, that shooter now been on the run for a little more than 24 hours or so. Meanwhile, we learned last night that this is indeed what neighbors feared it was, a mother and her child shot and killed outside their home.
I'm going to embrace the notion of happiness today.
Her friends say Jennifer Bellany was beautiful, positive, and loved children.
The way she talk about my own kids, it's one of those things like I expect to only see.
Long before her name was associated with tragedy, Jennifer Bologna was known for her determination, warmth, and strength. She wasn't just a mother, she was the center of her children's world, and she wore that role with quiet pride. To friends, she was the dependable one. To her family, she was the glue that held everything together, even in the worst of times. Jennifer lived in North Lauderdale, Florida, where she raised her 3 children, 2 sons and a daughter named Anastasia. Life hadn't made things easy for her, but she faced every obstacle with a work ethic that never wavered. Her goal was simple: to give her children a stable, loving home. Her journey into motherhood began early, and she carried that responsibility with a sense of purpose. Every school lunch, every homework check, every school drop-off, it was all done with the kind of consistency that children come to count on. She didn't just provide for her children financially, she was emotionally present. Even as she quietly juggled the demands of work and the weight of an unhealthy relationship, she never let her struggles overshadow her role as a mother. Jennifer met Andre O'Dane Anglin when they were both in high school. In the beginning, their connection seemed like the kind that could grow into something lasting. What began as young love eventually turned into marriage. But as time went on, things changed. Anglin struggled to keep a job. His behavior became increasingly unpredictable, and tensions inside their home began to rise. There were long periods of silence broken by outbursts, emotional manipulation, and threats that became more frequent over time. Jennifer's family began to notice. Her aunt, Bellan, later described Anglin as controlling and unreliable. There were times when Jennifer feared for her safety and for her children's. Despite everything, Jennifer didn't give up on trying to build a better life. She separated from Anglin more than once, hoping things might change. But eventually she realized that some changes would never come. In 2020, she made the decision to finalize the divorce. That decision wasn't easy. It came after years of enduring psychological and emotional distress. But it was also a turning point. Jennifer began to rebuild. She purchased a home, established her independence, and put all her energy into raising her children without fear. Her life after divorce wasn't free of challenges, but it was finally hers. She still allowed limited communication with Anglin, for the sake of their sons, but her boundaries were clear. She had no interest in reuniting. Anglin, however, refused to accept the end of their relationship. He continued to pressure her, hoping she would reconsider. When that didn't work, his behavior turned more aggressive. Jennifer sought a restraining order in 2018 after he threatened to kill her, but she didn't follow through with making it permanent. Whether it was fear, doubt, or the complicated hope that he might finally stop, only Jennifer knew. What's clear is that the warning signs were there. Still, she carried on. When Anglin faced unemployment or financial hardship, Jennifer, even after everything, tried to help. Not because she owed him anything, but because that's who she was. She contacted community members, tried to point him toward work, and made sure the children were cared for. But her emotional door stayed closed. That boundary, more than anything, may have sealed what came next. Jennifer was not a woman who gave up easily. She had survived emotional abuse, instability, and threats. She had tried to help the father of her children even after their marriage collapsed. But more than anything, she wanted peace for herself and her kids. In the end, Jennifer Bologna should be remembered not just for how her life ended, but for how she lived. She was a mother, a provider, a woman who fought through fear and uncertainty to build something better for her children. The tragedy that took her life doesn't erase the years she spent rising above the pain. It only makes her story more important to tell.
He took my baby's life away. He took my best friend, my niece.
The victims, Jennifer Bellony and her teen daughter, Anastasia.
How could you put us in so much pain?
It happened Wednesday morning on the 7900 block of Tam O'Shanter Boulevard. Deputies found the two victims dead from gunshot wounds. Sky 10 capturing two yellow tarps on the ground. Our cameras rolling as family members arrived to the crime scene that tragic day.
Anastasia Bologna, affectionately known as Nana to her family, was just 15 years old when her life was tragically cut short. To those who knew her, Anastasia was a bright and promising young woman with a personality that shone like a beacon. She was intelligent, full of life, and had an infectious smile that could light up any room. Her aunt, Bellan Bellony, shared a unique bond with her. They were not only relatives but also best friends, with the two being the same age and growing up together in an environment of mutual support. Their closeness allowed them to confide in one another, share secrets, and experience the joys and trials of adolescence together. Anastasia was not only a loving daughter and niece but also a young woman with aspirations and dreams for her future. Like most teenagers, she was beginning to explore the world around her, finding joy in the little things: friendships, school, and a budding sense of independence. Her aunt Bellan described her as someone who loved music and had big plans for her future, including dreams of furthering her education and building a career. She was not just a girl with potential. She was someone who had already started to make strides toward realizing that potential. Bellan even described how they would make plans for the future, dreaming about college and what kind of life she would create for herself. The tragic irony of Anastasia's death is impossible to overlook. She was killed in the place she should have felt safest, her home. For most teenagers, home represents security, a place to retreat from the world, a refuge where they are protected from harm. Yet, for Anastasia, that safety was stripped away in an instant. The morning of April 14, 2022, should have been just like any other. She had woken up to go to school, but instead, her life was tragically snatched away by the very man who should have been a protector, her mother's ex-husband, Anglin. In the days and weeks following Anastasia's death, Her family was left to grapple with the harsh reality of a future that would never include her vibrant energy. Friends and family struggled to understand the cruel twist of fate that had taken her away at such a young age. The suddenness of her death left a void that could never be filled, especially for those like Bellan, who had seen so much promise in the young girl. Anastasia's dreams were abruptly ended, and the cruel irony that she was taken from a home that should have been her safe haven only deepens the sorrow surrounding her death. The teenager who had so much life ahead of her was now a symbol of a life lost too soon, a future that was stolen in an act of violence. Anastasia's loss is a reminder of the fragility of life, the devastating impact of domestic violence, and the terrible cost that comes when abusive relationships continue to hold their victims in a vice grip even after separation. It's a reminder that no one, not even an innocent teenager, is immune from the consequences of that violence. Andre O'Dane Anglin seemed, on the surface, like an average man, perhaps even someone who could easily blend into the background of a bustling community. However, beneath the facade of normalcy, Anglin harbored a dark and violent side that would ultimately destroy the very family he once called his own. Anglin's relationship with Jennifer Bellony began during their high school years, a romance that eventually led to marriage. Jennifer was a young woman full of hope, eager to build a life with someone she believed in. For a time, their relationship appeared to have promise, but as the years went by, the dark side of Anglin began to surface. At first, Jennifer dismissed his controlling tendencies and erratic behavior, but as their marriage progressed, Anglin's abusive nature became more pronounced. He struggled with substance use, which only exacerbated the instability in their relationship. Jennifer found herself constantly walking on eggshells, trying to calm him down, defuse his outbursts, and cope with the emotional turmoil he created. Despite these struggles, Jennifer believed in her vows and tried to make the marriage work for the sake of their children. Yet, Anglin's manipulative behavior only grew worse. He used emotional blackmail, threatening suicide to control Jennifer and manipulate her into staying. At times, he would disappear, leaving her to carry the weight of their life alone, only to return with promises of change, promises he never kept. The abuse escalated over time. Jennifer's family, especially her aunt Bellony, recognized the toxic environment she was living in. Bellan recalled how Andre's issues with unemployment and his increasingly violent tendencies wore down Jennifer's spirit. Despite these challenges, Jennifer remained determined to protect her children, often putting their safety above her own emotional well-being. Andre's instability led to several separations between him and Jennifer, but each time, he would try to reconcile. Jennifer, ever the hopeful woman, would attempt to help him, even financially supporting him in an effort to stabilize his life. But each time she helped him, she found herself back in the cycle of abuse. By the time the couple officially divorced in 2020, Jennifer had rebuilt her life, buying a home and focusing on raising her children independently. However, this newfound freedom didn't last long. Although Jennifer had finally managed to extricate herself from the marriage, Anglin's harassment continued. He couldn't accept that Jennifer had moved on, that she was no longer under his control. His anger simmered beneath the surface, and it wasn't long before he began to escalate his threats. Jennifer had tried to protect herself, seeking legal help in the past, but the consequences of not fully pursuing a restraining order would soon become evident. Anglin's mental state appeared to deteriorate even further in the wake of their divorce. He was unable, or unwilling, to cope with his failures and the dissolution of his family. It was clear that, in his mind, Jennifer's decision to leave him was an unforgivable betrayal. His violence was no longer just an expression of anger. It was a desperate attempt to reclaim control over a life that was slipping further from his grasp. On the morning of April 14, 2022, Andre Anglin took matters into his own hands. The cruelty and premeditation of his actions would forever change the lives of everyone who knew Jennifer and Anastasia. In the hours before the murders, Jennifer had once again crossed paths with Anglin. She had tried to shield her children from him, but Anglin's fury was relentless. Witnesses reported seeing him outside her home, a confrontation that would soon spiral into a tragic act of violence. What drove Andre Anglin to murder the very people who had once been his family? What turned a man who was once a partner and father into someone capable of such monstrous acts? Those questions remain unanswered. But what is clear is that the man behind the smile, someone who once appeared to be an ordinary figure, was anything but. Anglin's darker nature, hidden beneath a veneer of charm, was the driving force behind the devastation that unfolded that morning in North Lauderdale.
And he abused her countless times.
Bellony's family says they've been divorced for 2 years after about a decade together. The physical abuse, the family says, is why they were no longer married. Family says Bellony and Anglin have 2 other young children. Broward Sheriff
Domestic violence is a growing epidemic, and too often, the signs are either ignored, dismissed, or misunderstood. Jennifer Bellony's case is a tragic reminder of how systems meant to protect victims can sometimes fail, leaving them vulnerable to an abusive partner's escalating violence. The warning signs were all there, clear and unmistakable, but the protection she sought was temporary, and her efforts to help Andre Anglin only deepened the cycle of abuse. Jennifer's initial attempt to protect herself came in 2018 when she sought a temporary restraining order after Andre threatened her life. For a brief moment, it seemed as though the system might offer the protection she desperately needed. Yet, this legal barrier was never made permanent. While the order was in place, it was never extended, and as the months wore on, Jennifer was left without the long-term protection that could have saved her and her daughter. The failure to secure a permanent restraining order marked a pivotal moment where the cracks in the system began to show. Jennifer's decision to help Andre post-divorce is a painful reflection of the complexities that victims of abuse often face. Despite their tumultuous past, Jennifer, in her desire to help him, continued to assist Andre financially and reached out to community organizations, hoping to give him the stability he so desperately needed. Her actions, born out of compassion and perhaps a faint hope that he could change, were ultimately exploited. Andre's refusal to accept the separation fueled his anger, and Jennifer's efforts only added fuel to the fire. His manipulation tactics, including threats of suicide and emotional blackmail, kept Jennifer trapped in a never-ending cycle of guilt and fear. Even after their divorce in 2020, Andre did not disappear from Jennifer's life. He stalked her relentlessly, sending a barrage of messages that ranged from threatening to pleading. His behavior was obsessive and unnerving, yet Jennifer, despite all the warning signs, continued to try and help him. She even assisted him financially at times, believing that perhaps he could stabilize his life. But it's important to recognize that this was not just an isolated case of emotional manipulation, it was part of a much broader pattern. According to real-world data on domestic violence, the escalation of stalking, harassment, and emotional blackmail is often a precursor to even more violent behaviors. Studies show that the majority of abusers escalate their tactics once their control begins to slip, as Andre's behavior did once Jennifer left him. Stalking and harassment are not simply isolated actions. They are part of a broader pattern of power and control that can be deadly when not addressed. Jennifer's case highlights a systemic failure on multiple fronts. While she sought help from the legal system, the lack of permanent protection allowed Andre to continue his campaign of harassment. At the same time, Jennifer's compassion led her to keep trying to help Andre, even after the divorce. The emotional toll this took on her, coupled with Andre's escalating behavior, left Jennifer and her family in a constant state of fear. Unfortunately, Jennifer's tragic end was not the first time an abused partner was failed by the system. According to the National Coalition Against Domestic Violence, NCADV, nearly 20 people every minute are physically abused by an intimate partner in the United States. The statistics reflect a glaring need for stronger protective measures for victims. Had Jennifer's restraining order been made permanent, had her community and legal support systems been more robust, perhaps the tragedy of April 14, 2022, could have been prevented. This tragedy serves as a stark reminder that the failure to address the warning signs of domestic violence, whether through legal inaction or a victim's misplaced compassion, can lead to devastating consequences. Jennifer Bellony's story is one of resilience, but it is also a cautionary tale about how, when the warning signs are ignored or dismissed. The morning of April 14, 2022, began like any other for Jennifer Bellony. The sun had just risen over North Lauderdale, Florida, as Jennifer went about her morning routine. She was preparing to take her daughter, Anastasia, and one of her sons to school. It was an ordinary Thursday, with a sense of calm in the air, yet within hours, everything would change forever. Jennifer had no idea that her violent past was about to collide with her present. As she prepared to leave her townhouse on Tam O'Shanter Boulevard, she saw a familiar and unwanted figure standing outside, her ex-husband, Andre Anglin. He was no stranger to her, and the sight of him immediately set off alarm bells. She quickly pulled out her phone and dialed her mother, trying to share the unsettling moment. "Mom, I think Andre's out there," Jennifer had said, her voice filled with concern. This was not the first time he had shown up unannounced after their divorce, but the fear in her voice was undeniable. Her mother urged Jennifer to stay calm, but the call abruptly ended. Jennifer's fears were quickly confirmed when Anglin ambushed her and her children moments later. Witnesses who lived nearby recalled the terrifying scene that unfolded outside Jennifer's home. Anglin approached with a sense of cold determination, armed with a firearm. He moved swiftly, targeting Jennifer first as she stepped outside. Without warning, the shots rang out, a sound that shattered the morning's calm and echoed through the quiet neighborhood. Jennifer fell to the ground, her life taken in an instant. Anastasia, who had been standing near her mother, reacted quickly. She tried to flee, her feet pounding against the pavement as she ran for safety. But Anglin was relentless. As Anastasia turned to escape, he fired again, striking her as she ran, leaving no time for her to find shelter. In mere moments, both mother and daughter lay lifeless in the driveway of their home. The community was in shock. Neighbors who witnessed the chaos were left frozen, some unable to fully comprehend what they had just witnessed. One neighbor later recalled how the screams of panic filled the street, followed by the sound of rapid footsteps as people rushed to call 911. Yet, by the time help arrived, the damage was done. Jennifer and Anastasia were already gone. Anglin, realizing the gravity of his actions, quickly fled the scene. Law enforcement responded swiftly, launching an intense search for him. A few days later, on April 16, 2022, the authorities found him in Fort Lauderdale, hiding in a gas station bathroom. Surrounded and trapped by deputies, Anglin made a final, tragic decision. He took his own life with a self-inflicted gunshot wound, refusing to face the consequences of the brutal killings he had just committed. In a matter of hours, Jennifer and Anastasia were both gone, their lives stolen in a violent act that could have been prevented. The community, which had known them for years, was left to grapple with the senselessness of it all. How could a man who once shared a life with Jennifer, the father of her children, commit such a horrific crime? What was it that led to this final, deadly act of violence? For those who knew Jennifer and Anastasia, the loss was immeasurable. The day of the attack would forever remain in the minds of all who witnessed it, a reminder of the tragic end to a story that had once been filled with love, promise, and hope.
After days of searching, the man suspected of killing a woman and her teenage daughter, 34-year-old Andre Anglin, is now dead after police say they tracked him down to this gas station.
Members of the Broward Sheriff's Office Viper Unit were searching in areas that Anglin was known to frequent.
Police say Anglin walked into this Circle K. It was in the bathroom when police tried to speak with him.
When deputies attempted to make initial contact with Anglin, they heard a gunshot.
Police say Anglin died by suicide. They've been searching for him since April 13th.
In the wake of the murders, the North Lauderdale community was left stunned. Word of the tragedy spread quickly. 2 lives stolen in broad daylight, a mother and daughter gunned down by someone they once called family. The pain was immediate, raw, and deeply personal, especially for those who knew Jennifer and Anastasia. Family members, still grappling with disbelief, gathered to mourn and support one another. Bellan, Jennifer's sister, was among the first to speak out. In interviews and community gatherings, her voice carried the heartbreak of a family blindsided by something they feared but hoped would never happen. She had seen the signs, witnessed the emotional toll the relationship had taken on Jennifer, and now found herself planning funerals for both her sister and niece. A candlelight vigil was held just days after the shooting. Neighbors, friends, schoolmates, and extended family stood together under the fading evening sky, holding candles in silence. Some wept openly. Others clung to each other, trying to make sense of the senseless. At the center of it all were photos of Jennifer and Anastasia, smiling, full of life, framed by flowers and handwritten notes of love. The funeral services were held in Miami Gardens, where Jennifer had grown up. Loved ones gathered in a space heavy with grief. Anastasia's classmates from Millennium 6 to 12 Collegiate Academy attended, many of them dressed in white to honor her memory. It was a sobering experience for teenagers unprepared to lose one of their own. The school later offered support services to help students cope with the loss. Jennifer's surviving children, now left without their mother and sister, were at the heart of the tragedy's emotional aftermath. The sudden void left by their absence was unimaginable. Family members rallied to provide them with stability, but nothing could fill the space Jennifer had occupied in their lives. The ripple effect of the crime extended beyond the immediate family. Community members who had interacted with Jennifer through work or school remembered her kindness and strength. Many expressed regret that her warnings hadn't been heeded, that the restraining order hadn't been made permanent, and that no one had been able to stop what was coming. The trauma of that day didn't end when the last candle was blown out or the final prayer was said. It lingered in the silence of a family home now marked by loss. It continued in the lives of her children, whose future had been irreversibly altered. And it echoed through the broader conversation around domestic violence, how it's often minimized until it explodes into tragedy. This was not just a personal loss. It was a generational wound, one that would take years, if not lifetimes, to fully comprehend. This story forces a difficult but necessary reflection. How many Jennifers are out there right now? How many Anastasias are living in homes that should be safe, but aren't? Raising awareness isn't enough if it doesn't lead to better laws, stronger enforcement, and a community-wide understanding of what abuse looks like before it turns fatal. Viewers must know that help is out there. Domestic violence hotlines, safe shelters, and support groups can offer lifelines. And for those who suspect someone they know may be in danger, it's not enough to hope things get better. Ask, intervene, help them make a safety plan. In the end, Jennifer's story isn't just about what happened to her, it's about what should have been prevented. She did everything she could. She fought, she asked for help, she tried to leave. But the system wasn't enough. And unless things change, it won't be the last time we hear a story like hers. Jennifer Bellony's final words to her mother that morning weren't panicked, they were cautious. She had seen Andre waiting, and she knew something wasn't right. That moment, fleeting and fragile, was a mother's last attempt to protect her children, to reach out before the unthinkable happened. In a matter of minutes, her worst fear became reality. 2 lives lost. A family destroyed. So we ask, how many more families must be torn apart before we listen, intervene, and act? These tragedies are not isolated. They echo in communities everywhere, carried in the grief of those left behind, in the silence of systems that move too slowly, and in the regrets of those who wish they had done more, sooner. Have you or someone you know ever faced a similar situation? What warning signs were missed or ignored? We invite you to share your stories in the comments. These conversations matter. They could be the voice someone needs to hear to step away from danger.
At Dark Trace Crime Stories,
we share stories that demand justice, remembrance, and change. If this story moved you, like this video, subscribe,